And we're live. Good evening. Welcome to WeatherBrains episode 583. This is the weekly show that's all about weather, and this is for March the 20th, 2017. This is the magical time of the show where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. Who will be the first to share a boring story? I bet you somebody in this group has one. Brian, you're a boring man.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
that's a compliment.
I guess. I don't think it's a compliment when you're not supposed to be boring in this day and age.
No,
but I have a rant over long range forecasts.
Well, that's just as good. Go.
I've been following, of course, one of our favorite companies and their long range forecast for our festival in Little Helena, Alabama, in Mother's Day or on Mother's Day weekend. And I think it's interesting that if you look at the detailed forecast, they're actually forecasting rain and thunderstorms for 7 straight days. How many times in May does that happen?
Now, is this MetLoop or AccuWeather?
It's AccuWeather.
Okay. Well, so if they're right, will you apologize to those guys? Will you bow down and say, I'm sorry?
I'd be glad to.
Okay.
I don't think I'm in any danger.
I think that's safe, huh, Brian?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty safe here. We'll see, but I just
Hey, Bill, talk in your mic again.
Yeah, hold on. Let me make sure I'm set right here. Hold on.
Something don't sound right.
It doesn't sound right.
You're right. It's not.
Sounds nasty.
Now it should sound better. How about
there you go.
There you go.
Yeah, that sounds much better. Let me make sure I invited all our guests. We have so many of them tonight.
Yeah, this is going to be a wild show.
How come we have so many guests? I only got 2.
Everybody just kept adding guests. So
no, this might be the greatest show ever. Just strap in for a wild ride.
Might be the most adventurous one yet.
We're gonna have what's fun. This is live on television, so there's no telling what's going to happen. When Dr. D is on the show, Dr. D is on the show.
And I need to warn you, he's been to Pint Night somewhere in Norman, so it could get really fun.
It's a good-looking hat, Chuck.
Thanks.
I like it.
I do, too.
Ooh, yeah.
It looks comfortable. It really does.
Yeah. I like to advertise certain facts. Anyway, just to follow up on the warning you just got, I did have three pints of beer. So my normal inhibited self will be a little bit less inhibited tonight.
This is gonna be the greatest show we've ever done. I sense it right now. This is going to be the greatest ever.
Doswell Uncensored. That's the show title.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
That's the only hat I've got. It's a cat in the hat.
Okay.
Or I'm reading somewhere, huh?
The Blizzard of '93 hat up here, but no, I'll go topless tonight. Yeah, this one's going to rock and roll. I think I was scheduled to speak at Valparaiso University Saturday, and I warned these guys, March, tornado season.
Ooh.
There is a high danger.
I forgot about that. You may have to do it via Skype, huh?
Yeah, it's just not going to happen in person. We'll see if we can make it happen some way. But and then tomorrow, goodness, I've got this. So I'm speaking in Huntsville in the morning, and I've got a school program in Birmingham at like early afternoon. And then Brian, we have to go down to
Lineville.
Yeah, so it's going to be one of those days. So I've decided I'm going to get up at 3 a.m. to do the production tomorrow morning. So,
oh my gosh,
sleep is just not happening.
Well, I want you to know I got up.
We missed you in San Antonio, James.
Oh,
yeah, no, I so badly wanted to hear you guys. I mean, what a great lineup. I mean, goodness, that was a great collection of speakers. So how'd it go, Chuck?
Fabulous. I was very pleased with the list of speakers, and I think it all went very smoothly. Apart from when you first came in, you were having some mic problems. And
I had no idea.
Hey, Gina.
Hello, how are you?
and breaking
Hey,
up.
Gina.
Wow.
I'm great, Gina. How about you?
It's great to see you.
Yeah. Yeah, we miss you around here.
Yeah, well, I might be coming out to visit a little bit more often, so never know.
Hey,
That'd be
Gina,
great.
he sounded sincere when he said that too. Hey, Gary,
Well,
Gary, can you
Generally, I mean what I
can
say,
hear you.
and I say what I mean.
Awesome. So, Gary, you're good.
I am good.
Aubrey, are you good? I think you're muted.
And she's not good.
I can't hear her.
Yeah. So something just told me that we needed to check her audio. Actually, no, we got 5 minutes before this starts. So,
Wow.
Yeah, we're standing room only. We've only got 2 more slots and 2 more panelists.
we think that Rick Smith is going to be out. He's got a storm spotter class tonight. I'm hoping Nate shows up. Nate's had some
Bad
Chilling.
luck.
chilling problems
Yeah.
too lately.
He's had a
House
tough
flooded?
week. Yeah.
His
The
what?
stove caught
His
on
house
fire.
flooded too.
And his stove caught on fire?
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that, Gina. Wow.
Yeah. No, he's had a real tough couple of weeks.
Wow. Goodness. Well, then if he doesn't show up, then we won't blame him.
Oh, we can always blame him.
Well, that's true. We can.
Never stopped us before.
I don't think it has. No.
Kevin, can you hear us okay? You good?
Hello.
Oh, hello. Got
Got
the
me?
accelerant here.
That's good.
Yeah, I might go off tonight.
Oh boy.
All right.
This is I just sense I'm just going to sit back and watch this. I just I don't even want to say a word. I just want to sit back and listen and learn.
Are we talking about this thing that happened last week? Is this the thing?
Yes.
A big part of it, yeah.
Yes.
There's a lot of
Jason coming
conditional
on?
instability in the air tonight.
Is Jason coming on?
I don't think
Jason
so.
Samenow?
Yeah.
I don't think he came through. And I didn't understand that we could have had carbon, but when I was told that they were muzzled, I didn't even ask.
Well, is he
Well,
muzzled or
I mean,
unmuzzled?
Gina says he wasn't muzzled.
He told me he was not muzzled. But his son is in town, so he was unavailable tonight.
Yeah, so
Well, he's got to get his priorities straight. I mean,
I'm happy to meet Gina, but hear from because she and I haven't been on this program together. But I'm happy. I'm interested to hear rather what she has to say on this too.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh
I'm
boy.
embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for anybody who participated in that on our end. I think that's I'm embarrassed.
I sense Kevin's about to go off. His head's
Yeah,
about
he
to
is.
explode.
He's about to go out. No, I'm going to be nice, but
No, please.
I'm
no.
embarrassed.
Oh, please.
So, Chuck, I assume you're familiar with the Eastern blizzard situation.
Yeah, I saw that. In fact, I've already made some comments about that on Facebook. I may be a little bit centered on this one.
A little bit. What?
I don't think it's quite as bad as everybody seems to want to make it out to be.
Exactly.
I don't
I
think so.
I agree.
It's clickbait. They were all clickbait. Just look at the headlines. Every headline was clickbait.
Yeah.
And
All right,
that's
well,
why
we'll-
I'm embarrassed.
Especially when you use words like lied.
Right.
Yeah, but
Yeah, that's. We're not on air yet, right?
We're always on the air.
We
Are you
are
kidding
streaming
me?
live.
Are we already?
They're not on television yet, Gina.
Don't let that stop you, Gina. Don't let that stop you.
Yeah, I mean, we're just a little close knit family here. We all, we're just talking between us girls here.
I didn't. Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, just
I
stick it to
didn't
the microphone.
appreciate that the AP article quoted the word confused or confusion, and I never saw a quote with it in it.
Yeah.
And I thought that there was, I think they stretched maybe what the truth was. I think that was a poor choice of words. I think it was a poorly written article.
Excellent comment.
Who has the AP? I never saw the AP. I saw the Gothamist and the CBS
It
and
was
Jason.
Seth Borenstein.
Yeah, where is that? I never saw that.
Oh, that was the one that preceded the.
Right.
Yeah, that was the first one that I saw.
Yeah, I heard that was the first one, but I never saw that anywhere.
I do believe, ladies and gentlemen, it is about to be screened. And hello, welcome to our television viewers. We are glad you were here. We're about to start this program. Is this the one, Gina?
All you television viewers are too late. We've already gone off.
Yeah, no.
Train has left the station.
So for full disclosure here, we are just now on local television in my market. So welcome to the television viewers. We're about to start the show here in about 1 minute. Gina, is this the right article? Weather Service decided last minute not to cut the forecast.
Yes,
Seth Borenstein.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
He's a great science reporter. He's a really great science reporter. But the way that article was represented, I just felt like it was incomplete.
Okay.
I didn't feel like it was the story.
Let's get this thing started because I'm afraid we're going to miss the good stuff if we don't do this here. So, the pre-show doesn't make it on the recorded podcast, which is how most people listen. So here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains episode number 583 for March the 20th, 2017. This might be the best show we've ever done, Brian Peters. I'm excited.
I'm excited about it too.
I'm looking at the collection of people we have here. We have the subject matter, and I just sense this is going to be, just strap in. It's going to be a great show. Brian, you're busy. We're busy doing storm spotter classes, and we should mention that Rick Smith, the WCM at the Weather Service in Norman, is doing one right now. So he said he'll probably listen on the way back, so he gets to consume and not be involved in the show tonight.
And I have it on good authority that he has tinfoil lining the inside of his vehicle so he won't get any radiation from the show.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So we've got Kevin Selly, and Kevin, you are ready to rip into something here. So,
well, no, I think, I was sitting here thinking for a moment or two. I thought if I could just sit here quietly and listen for 30 minutes, then I have to go do my Fox show, and I get off of doing a rant and people thinking that I'm some sort of a crazy person.
We all know you're some sort of crazy person.
Well, that is true.
I mean, after all, you wrote "There is no normal." I loved it in the Digital Meteorologist. That's
another thing that I would go off on today. Maybe that one comes later. No.
Wow.
Look, there are much smarter
context for that one.
Yeah, no, that I'll give that later. There are much smarter people on here than me, and I'm anxious to hear what they have to say about the big what are we calling this? Post-gate.
Yeah.
Good
the winter storm Stella.
Weather Service,
or as it was named.
Let's call it Weather Service thinks you're stupid gate.
Wow.
Whoa.
Aubrey, are you in for this? Are you ready for this?
Yes, you can hear me?
Yes.
I switched to the iPad.
Okay, you're in. So,
Okay.
Bill Murray, I turn the floor over to you, and let's get this thing rocking and rolling.
I'm just looking down here at all these faces on the bottom of the hangout. And I think this thing's going to tip over, James. I think this is
that's all right.
The most heavyweight group.
This is podcast tipping.
Yeah, and I want to make sure we can hear Ricky Matthews. Ricky, you can hear us. You can talk to us.
I can hear you.
I'm so excited you're here. I just saw you like this about 10 days ago on your podcast. So. Tell us about the Carolina Weather Group, Ricky.
Yeah, I mean, you've been making the rounds. We've all been making the rounds as part of a National Weather Podcast Month. Carolina Weather Group, it's funny, we didn't really start as a weather podcast. We kind of started more as a discussion among local meteorologists in Charlotte and some Facebook forecast groups that work in Western North Carolina. And we did Google Hangouts when big storms were coming, kind of like the one that just hit the Northeast or didn't hit the Northeast. And then it kind of translated into a weekly podcast where we just started talking more about weather and started to get some guests. So we are a Wednesday night podcast at around 8 Eastern. Usually goes for about an hour or so, and we talk anything from local weather to guests outside of the Carolinas. The name's a little misleading. We don't focus as much on the Carolinas as you may think. We actually kind of talk all nationwide and even globally. So we have a fun little gig just like you guys do.
Yeah, y'all do a really good job, and I enjoyed being on it a couple of weeks ago. Now, you're at CYB in Bristol, is that right?
Yep, WCYB, Aubrey's old stomping grounds of Northeast Tennessee. I've been here actually a little over 2 years now, so I'm a weekend morning meteorologist at WCYB.
So if we get this WeatherBrains corporate jet, you're going to eventually be able to fly it, right, Ricky?
I think that's been the joke for a while now. If meteorology doesn't work out, TV doesn't work out, maybe I'll just do full-time flying everyone around the country. So,
well, if you'll just come fly us occasionally to weather events, we'd be real happy for sure. So
sounds good. We got to get Nate, and Nate teamed up with me too, and have him start flying us.
That's right. We'll have two of you guys to fly us. But we're sure glad you're here tonight, Ricky. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
All right, now you have to be in the middle of this now.
No
sitting back, pretend it's your own show.
Sounds good.
And jump right in. So we're glad you're here. Of course, Gina Iasko is a special guest. She's been on a couple of times. Gina is a senior social scientist at the Eastern Research Group, and I guess you're joining us from Washington tonight.
I am, Arlington, Virginia.
Wow.
Where the rain snow line. We witnessed it.
That whole I-95 thing. I'm coming up there Friday, Gina. We're coming for the weekend and coming for the cherry blossoms. I hear they're not quite as badly damaged as we thought.
Not as badly, but they're actually, I think, something like a 40 to 60% loss, I believe. But there'll be enough out there that you'll still be able to enjoy them.
Well, our friend Sheldon Cusselson said he was hoping that the hot air from the Hill and the White House might warm the cherry trees, but it sounds like that didn't work.
I have no comment.
I think we ought to let Chuck comment because I know that he voted for Trump.
Yeah, let's just cut to the chase here. Of course, Dr. Chuck Doswell is a man who needs no introduction in our group. Chuck, you wear your feelings on your sleeve on your Facebook page. They'll suspend the political buzzer for 30 seconds. Talk about our current political situation.
Without cussing, it's probably going to be difficult. I would say Chinese fire drill is about as mild as I can possibly put it.
So is there a good outcome here, Chuck?
Well, hopefully we'll be eliminating one current president and trying again.
There you go. That's interesting. We'll get into some more political stuff before it's over with, but we're sure glad you're here tonight, Chuck. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Bill.
So now there's another weather podcast out there that has beer on it during it. So I'm going to get to be on it in a couple of weeks. So I'm excited about that. That's the Storm Front Freaks, and I'm looking forward. They need to have you on there, Chuck.
Well, we used to do our own little show here from Norman, but and we had beer and wine.
So how is Gene doing, Chuck?
How is who?
Gene Roden.
How is Gene Roden doing? Gene Roden?
Gene? Yeah, he's doing okay, I guess. He's mostly down in Texas now.
Mm-hmm.
He and his wife moved into a house they have down there. His wife got a much better paying job than she can get in Oklahoma. So it worked out really well.
Well, that's good to hear. Your show was really fun and really good. I used to love listening to that.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun.
Talk about resurrecting the band or anything?
No, it was all basically built around R.J. Evans' great radio studio that he set up, but he wasn't getting any resources to support the cost of the programming, so eventually he had to quit.
Well, we understand that. So
yeah,
we're not getting any resources over here either, but at least we have a lot of fun. And you're
well, you got James there, and he's rich, so of course you can.
Oh yeah,
that's right. We don't need money. We got James.
That's right.
Mr. Deep
Flowing with
Pockets.
cash here.
Show title.
Yeah.
And
money, we've got James.
Yeah. And finally, filling the ninth seat tonight, Gary Satkowski. Of course, Gary was on in December. He is the retired MIC from the National Weather Service in Mount Holly and known for his outspokenness and a perfect guest to join us tonight. Gary, we're glad you're here.
Glad to be here. Yeah, it's interesting. Even though I retired last May, I can't seem to stop talking about the weather. So certainly that happened again with last week's event. So it was very interesting. In some aspects entertaining. I wound up taking one of the Philly TV meteorologists to the woodshed, and then the governor and I had a few words to exchange. So for the governor of New Jersey. So and we had a snowstorm too, all wrapped around it. So it was really pretty interesting.
So talk about that exchange with the Philly meteorologist. I thought that was interesting. What fill us in on what happened there?
Well, there's unfortunate sort of negative history with that individual. And as I told someone who was kind of wondering why the conversation kind of went the way it did, I kind of said it wasn't, this wasn't the first time we'd had this dance. We'd been here before. And he was making some negative comments about the National Weather Service. And I'm not opposed to, I make negative comments about the National Weather Service, and obviously, everyone's entitled to an opinion. But his comments, he's sort of, devoted himself to being rather uninformed regarding what the National Weather Service does. So he's not a real capable person to identify the pros and cons. And he was complaining that the National Weather Service, this was a couple days before the storm even arrived. And at that time, the Weather Service was following its policy, which is to update the snowfall forecast twice a day, once every 12 hours. And he was criticizing the Weather Service for updating the snowfall forecast. So, I was like, what is going on? What is the problem? And things just kind of went downhill from there. So then I gave him a lecture, and then he blocked me on Twitter. So,
and you're a better man for it, right?
What can I say? In my snarkier moments, I say I'm just taking out the trash. It's just I just don't know what else to do when people get stupid like that. It's
can't fix stupid.
Yeah, I mean, we have media. This person's never attended a media workshop in the almost 20 years I was there at the Mount Holly office. So this is someone. And they haven't been around that long, but they've been around for like 6-8 years, I think, in the local area, long enough to certainly have understood what the Weather Service does and what the Mount Holly office does. And like I said, you can certainly critique that forecast if you're inclined to do so, but the Weather Service updating the forecast every 12 hours, you can't even find it on the list of things to talk about.
So what was your assessment of the storm and the performance, Gary, from your standpoint?
Well, obviously it did not do what we said it was going to do, what the Weather Service said it was going to do, or even, the broadcast meteorologist. I'll step away, and not just, I haven't had the Weather Service hat on formally for 10 months now. So, there was some variety in both the New York and Philadelphia media markets as far as the broadcast meteorologists were concerned, and those who aimed low did better, so there were a few, there was at least, I think it was the NBC affiliate in the Philly market, and I forget who up in the New York area, were aiming a little lower, and so they could claim sort of a moral victory, when some people were trying to beat them over the head and shoulders on social media over some of the big numbers. They could kind of say, well, that wasn't the numbers we were going with. We understand others you might have got that someplace else. And so, I think it was pretty good. I didn't see anyone throwing anyone under the bus per se. Everyone just kind of said, look, this was on my number, so I'll defend it. It was easier to defend if it was lower. My critique from the Weather Service is that obviously it didn't deliver what it said it was going to deliver in the location where we said it was going to deliver. And I gritted my teeth at some of the statements that were coming out the next day. The article you guys referenced, where it says they didn't want to change the forecast because they didn't want to confuse the public. I would simply say, that's horrible messaging. Now, I don't know if that's a fair reflection of what anyone at Public Affairs said, anyone at Weather Service headquarters or WPC.
I'll jump in. The article they insinuated that there was a quote, and it never showed the quote.
Yeah,
yes,
see, that's
absolutely.
So I don't even think it's fair game to say that they said it until I see quotes around the statement that use the word confused or confusion. And I think someone stretched the truth, and I think that was unfair.
Where did Seth get it in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not positive. He's a great reporter. I'm sure he has a source. I tweeted him publicly, and he gave a response, but it really didn't satisfy my need for more information. So I'm sure he has a source for it. But if you're going to say that they said that, I want to see the quote.
Yeah, because that's an excellent point, because that really drove some of the subsequent, when I mentioned that I was going to be on WeatherBrains earlier this evening, that showed up in 2 or 3 of the comments. I sort of invited people to make, this business about not trusting us with the correct forecast information really sits poorly, on social media, as you might expect, but also you saw it picked up on a number of the media outlets. Now, I will say the other thing I was going to say, the other point, and this will be, a little more me saying this about the Weather Service, is that on one of the follow-up, conversations about that, I heard them say how they got, they tried to stress what went right, and they talked about how the timing, was on target, and the intensity was on target, and and they left out the critical thing that obviously a lot of people were hanging their hat on. And I said, I listened to that, and I said afterwards, I said, we've discovered the nexus between snowstorm forecasting and real estate. The three most important factors are location, and location. That you can get the timing right, you get the intensity right, but the location, cannot be ignored as needing to be right too. And again, to be melodramatic, it'd be sort of like DOD talking about some operation overseas. We used the right size bomb and we dropped it at the right time, but we hit the wrong town. You can't make that kind of. You might as well understand that some people are just going to be really upset that the location was not proper. It wasn't nailed. I guess. I occasionally do look for the silver lining.
How far off was it really?
Well, if you look at what people experienced, in the Philadelphia area, they were talking about 12 to 15 inches of snow, maybe 18 inches of snow. In the city of Philadelphia itself, they got 6 to 8. You had to go about another 50.
I'm talking about where the really heavy stuff was relative to those urban areas.
If you want 50,
let's face it. Not a new story.
No.
Nobody in the field of meteorology knows anything about forecasting the weather has ever made the claim that we can nail these locations perfectly. There is a difference between uncertainty and confusion. Mm-hmm. And, the notion that there was confusion to me is just nonsense. Yeah. The fact that they didn't get it exactly right is not news. We never get it exactly right. So, and this comes down to something I wanted to ask Gina about.
Yep.
It seems to me that we are still struggling with the means to communicate uncertainty in a way that actually tells people information they can use.
Yeah.
Something like that, then we're going to have more and more of this crap.
Yeah. So, I'm not the meteorologist on this panel, but I think there are a few different ways to look at this storm from a communication perspective. You can look at one location and say they got it wrong. But to say that the whole forecast was a bust, I just hugely disagree with. There were parts of upstate New York, Vermont, Massachusetts that got nailed with snow. Yes. So I think as a whole, there were aspects of that forecast that were phenomenal. And for that, again, when you look at it as holistically, I think the Weather Enterprise did a pretty good job. Now, the location point, I think, gets a little hairy when you start honing in on those small geographic areas. Then you start seeing sort of a larger standard of error, in terms of where that rain snow line was.
Hey, Gina, I'd like to say something there, though, is I never saw anything in the media that said bust. No, nobody said that.
Okay, then we're critiquing ourselves.
Yeah, I think meteorologists we're some of the hardest on ourselves about what we do. And I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about communicating this uncertainty, because, I worked for the Weather Service for 36 years, and I now work for James on television. And I know that I have the opportunity doing on-air weather to be able to say, hey, if this low goes 25 miles further south, the snows won't be in Birmingham. It's going to be down here. But, but still my forecast, I have to put in snow.
And there's no way you can say with absolute confidence that it's going to go on a certain track.
That's right.
Exactly. And so this is something I actually did an email exchange today on this subject about what's the difference between uncertainty and confidence. And indeed, I think in certain situations, there isn't a difference, but it really depends on how you, the forecaster, want to convey it. So, for example, if we think of as uncertainty as something quantitative that we're putting numbers towards, that's uncertainty. But we can still have confidence, sort of a subjective feeling for that forecast. And to go out of snow for a moment, the easiest example I can give you is Hurricane Katrina, versus Rita. When you look at the cone of uncertainty, because it's based on standard error over the last 5 years, right? The cone of uncertainty is the same amount of nautical miles at each time scale. So from that point of view, the uncertainty that we're showing people is the same for those two storms, right? If you go back and look, the nautical mile error is the same. But the confidence on those two storms for the track was very different. You've got the director of Hurricane Center, Max Mayfield, calling New Orleans on Katrina because they were confident it was going towards that area, right? But Rita, we were less confident. The models, there was less agreement. We were less confident on it. And so, and I see this a lot when I speak to emergency managers. They want to see the information, but then they also want to hear Gary, right? They want to hear the WCM or the MIC or the SU, and they want to go, all right, I saw the uncertainty, I saw the numbers, but how do you feel about the confidence? So there's a difference. They want to know the numbers, they want the objective information, but they also want, how do you feel about this forecast? Do you feel good about it? Do you feel like you've got enough information to tell me confidently this is where it's going? Or do you think that the information, it's a little too widespread and you don't have high confidence? I think there's a difference. And frankly, I'm not sure that we're good yet at differentiating the two and communicating both.
Well, let me jump in on this one. There are two different types of probability. There's the sort of probability that you can derive from some sort of objective forecasting system, and it's based on some set of assumptions, and it's supposedly been calibrated or whatever. And then there's the subjective probability that weather forecasters exercise in issuing their forecast. Right. And it's that subjective probability that is totally confidence in their forecast. That Alan Murphy explained this to me years ago. And those are two very different things, but they are both legitimate forms of probability.
So I'm not going to disagree with you on that point. I think the challenge is that I think as a forecast community, I don't even want to deal yet with partners or core partners or emergency managers. Let's just talk about the forecast community for a moment. I don't think we have any agreement in the community yet on what probabilities communicate. And I've seen this in a variety of contexts, be it probability of precipitation, just the pops on a daily basis. I've heard different definitions for that. I've been following the facets program at NSSL and using probabilistic hazard information and watching forecasters try to convey probability there. And now we have snow probabilities, which I think all of this is awesome. I think we're going in the right direction. But I think before we can even think about how we're going to communicate it outwards, I think we at least have to have a shared understanding of what it means to all of us. And I'm not so sure yet that we do. I'm not sure that we've invested. I don't disagree with that. Alan Murphy was saying exactly the same things 30 years ago. So I guess I would say we're not making much progress on this particular sort of issue. Well, it's
among ourselves whether we should even be using probability.
Well, I think, all right, so there are a couple points there that I definitely want to make. And I'm not sure that it's probability, but I'm going to go back and use the word uncertainty. I definitely think we need to communicate uncertainty. How, I think, is the bigger question. But when you look at scholars like Julie DeMuth, Rebecca Morse, Susan Jocelyn, they've all done extensive research in the area of uncertainty. And it shows that people make better decisions when that uncertainty is included. And in fact, Susan Jocelyn's work has said, she's an experimental psychologist, she argues to include probability in it, that it improves decision making. So there is definitely evidence to include uncertainty. However, the part that I would caveat, I'm not sure that we've invested enough research as a weather enterprise in this area, is that many of us come from different frames of reference when we look at uncertainty. Numbers can sometimes overwhelm me. And so when I'm tired and I'm looking at numbers, I'm looking at them going, I don't have the cognitive ability right now. It's what time at night? Like, I'm on my 10th cup of coffee today. Just just tell me what to do. I don't have the capacity right now to deal with numbers. And yet there are other people who love them and they live by them, right? And you've got a spectrum of everyone in between. And so how then do we communicate probabilities or uncertainty? It's not a one size fits all. And I think this is where
Absolutely.
this is where we get super caught up.
Formulation, nor is a particular formation of probability, however you describe it, doesn't preclude the possibility of other descriptions also conveying information, but perhaps to a different audience.
Right. Well, and this is the tricky thing. Just because it makes sense to us doesn't mean it's necessarily going to make the same sense to someone else, right? And it doesn't mean they don't understand. It does not mean they're stupid. I hate that. I hate that word. It just means they're coming from a different perspective. Just the very nature of this panel, we're going to come from different perspectives, right? So if I threw up a probability distribution of something, we're all going to come up with a different understanding of it. And to go back to snow, I'm actually working on some research for the National Weather Service, looking at snow probabilities and whether it's helping decision makers make better decisions. Does it improve their decision process? But one of the challenges I've had is that when I talk to a variety of people, be it within the National Weather Service or outside in the community, when I show them the graphs and I ask them what they think it means, I haven't gotten a uniform response. Notice I didn't use the word consistent because I'm not looking for consistent. If we're saying it's objective science, then it should have an objective answer. There actually is an answer for how to interpret it in some respect, right? I'm not getting a uniform answer. So then if we're showing this probabilistic information and within our community, we can't have a uniform answer on what that output is, then how are we expecting our partners and then more broadly speaking, the general public to understand that? And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges for our community. I think the forecast community grappling with what probability means, then the bigger question of how to communicate it.
Well, I think there is a standard definition for, say, probability of precipitation. It's just that a lot of forecasters don't even know it. The interesting part is that forecasters can be quite successful at making probability forecasts, even if they don't understand what the heck they're doing.
Well, isn't that ironic? I mean, then why can't we say the same thing about our partners? And they don't need to know everything about meteorology, but they can still make dynamite decisions based on the information they have at hand, right? Yeah. I mean, it should go, it should be the same.
Well, the information
that's probably go ahead, Chuck.
Is communicated to a broad audience. As you say, people come at it from a whole different spectrum of perspectives. And we can't, as you said, there is no one size fits all answer.
There isn't. But one of the things that I like to say, because more recently I've really, the more I've thought about it, the more I believe it's true. The way weather communication works in the United States is so very different than how it works in other places. We have this dynamite growing weather industry, not only private sector, but broadcast meteorology. And some people look at that and go, oh, but now we have inconsistent messaging. And I go, we have variety. Because it's not a one size fits all. And so when you have this growing diverse weather enterprise, all of a sudden we do have a little bit of variety of how we're communicating. And the more I think about that, the more I think it's an asset to weather communication. And I'm not suggesting that, completely different forecasts is a good thing. That's not what I'm saying. But I think what I am saying is that the variety of perspectives and the different ways to convey uncertainty or probabilities, I think that is actually an incredibly good thing for mass communication, to have that sort of variety. And it also pushes us to be more innovative in the way we think about it.
So
On that
Gina,
note, Gina,
Well, there are a lot of people out there issuing forecasts, and not all of them are competent. And part of the problem with inconsistent messaging is that some of the messages are coming from some teenager sitting at his computer desk cranking out blog forecasts. And this, they don't know diddly about what they're talking about.
Snow is one of the rare things too, where it seems like everyone makes a forecast. When we get a hurricane forecast, pretty much every TV broadcaster is just going to show the National Hurricane Center forecast.
Right.
Snow is that unique instance where we all seem to make our own.
And it's interesting, right? I mean, we could make a claim that, well, you know, why is it? I mean, I see a really big push. You're right. I think when it comes to hurricane communication, we do see, I'll use the word consistent here, fairly, to an extent, the track is fairly uniform, and the messages, I think, across the board are similar enough to say that they're consistent. In severe weather right now, I'd say there's a push for more sameness, so more consistency, I think, in that area. But when it comes to snow, I think you might be right. You know, why is it? Is there something qualitatively different about snow? Is it because it's perhaps not a severe category? It's perhaps life-threatening if you decide to drive in a situation and an accident, but snow has a different quality to it. You know, I grew up in the Boston area. As I lose my earpiece here, I grew up in New England. You know, snow to me was a snow day. It was sledding. Now as an adult, I can telecommute. I've got my sunroom that I'm sitting in and I can watch the snowfall. It's actually kind of peaceful. I don't fear snow the way I fear other hazards. And so I wonder if as a community, we just look at it very differently. And so that opens the door to a variety of messages.
I think even among
that reminds me of the business we have with flash floods. Everybody's experienced rain. Nobody feels fear from rain. And yet there are times when you need to be afraid of rain. And so some of that is a kind of complacency or familiarity that breeds contempt for the significance. Snow can be a hazardous weather event.
It's funny. Think about big heat waves. I don't think of the sun as a risk, right? I mean, a sunny day, generally speaking, is a pretty good day, right? I mean, we're happy when the sun is out, but when you think of heat waves or you think of prolonged sun exposure, you get sunburns, you can get heat exhaustion, heat stroke, right? So too much exposure to the sun in certain conditions actually isn't a good thing, but we don't think of the sun as a fearful risk. We don't think of rain in general as a fearful risk. They're not as sexy. You know, they're not a sexy hazard the way, you know, tornadoes or hurricanes are. And maybe, I don't know if snow is different. Snow, I think, is different than rain or a sunny day. But I also think it's unique from sort of those more severe categories of flash flooding. If you have visualizations of that, I think that kind of conveys that the rain has a larger risk when you have those photographs or large video footage. And tornadoes and hurricanes, of course, are distinct from snow as well. So we definitely have qualitative differences among our hazards that, you know, again, it's not one size fits all for communicating each one.
So Gary, you retire and Christie goes off the rails. Were you supposed to be in charge of him or something?
Yeah. I think I thought he knew better, but I guess you know, that was my mistake. So yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I did. There were a couple points there that Gina made that I want to kind of follow up on, and the one there involving Governor Christie has to do. What I would tie it back into sort of antecedent conditions is when Gina was talking about how emergency managers, you know, or government partners want to see, not just hear the forecast, but see, you know, and hear from the, you know, Weather Service, local office leadership, whoever's doing the briefing, and take the temperature and tone of the briefing, not just the you know, factual information. And what happened the night before the storm that I think, and I'm not justifying what Christie did, because obviously my comments, you know, indicated that I thought it was highly inappropriate what he did, but the night before the storm, when you're looking at, you know, when you're reading signals, I was doing the same thing. The snow totals along the I-95 corridor kind of held steady. There's, you know, and again, that feeds into that narrative about, you know, holding the numbers. But the numbers further inland went higher, the snow totals, and the Mount Holly office expanded blizzard warnings. It expanded blizzard warnings over a good chunk of northern in portions of central New Jersey and wrapped around, not into Philadelphia itself, but into the suburbs on the north and west side. And to do that right before the storm, literally 6 hours before the precipitation onset, sent a message, I think, of confidence about what was about to happen that then was completely undercut by looking out the window and you see, you don't see a blizzard, you see 6 or 8 inches of snow, and now there's this miserable mixture of sleet and freezing rain falling down. Whatever that is, it's not a good thing. It's not a blizzard. And so I think Chris Christie earlier in the process, I saw where Chris Christie, maybe like a day before the storm, people were pinging on him saying, are you going to declare a state of emergency? And he kind of, there was a storm back in 2015 that I did the apology for back in January. And he made a veiled reference to the fact that in the past we've had storms that didn't pan out as nearly as bad as we thought they were going to. And that was one where he did call, a state of emergency and a transportation ban. And so he was balking, and I understood, okay, you got burned, 2 years ago and you're still remembering it. But then he that evening, after the blizzard warnings came out and after I assume he got another briefing from the local weather service office in Mount Holly, he went full in. He called the state of emergency. There was a transportation ban up in, portions of the state. I mean, he really went all in. And then and he was obviously, as the next morning, he wasn't a happy camper, or by midday, whenever he did the press conference, he said the storm has severely underperformed, but that again is probably that's somewhat overdone. You have to be right. Certain spots that might be true, but not for other spots. And he said after 7.5 years, he'd had his fill of the National Weather Service. And that second part, I got the largest, baseball bat I could find and verbally teed off, and reminded him of some of the catastrophic decision making that certain parts of the New Jersey, state of New Jersey government had made during Sandy, which was an outstanding forecast. So it goes both ways. Sometimes our partners don't leverage a simply fantastic forecast. They don't take full advantage of it. And other times the forecast does sometimes not meet our own expectations nor theirs. His words were overly harsh and inappropriate, and he made some disrespectful comments. He made on the topic of communicating uncertainty. He made this comment before about generally how weather forecasters get paid too much. He said, that there's, he says it's like a pollster telling me before an election that I might get 35% of the vote or might get 60% of the vote. He said a pollster who operated that way, wouldn't stay in business long in politics. And I got the sense that, that was his commentary about, if you look at some of those graphics the Weather Service is providing, we came in near the lower end of the range, in the Philly and New York areas. If you looked at sort of like the minimum amount of snowfall that was expected, we actually got that or just a little bit more. So, we captured, that's like the 10th percentile versus the actual forecast, the mid-range or most likely forecast, and then the 90th percentile. We came in around the 10th percentile, and he's saying that's not good enough. He set aside the garbage talk. He's saying that's not good enough for my decision-making process. That part, I think, should be listened to. The rest of it was him being immature.
So there are a couple follow-ups to that. I mean, one, I'd love to be a fly in the wall on a lot of these DSS webinars, the decision support webinars, because I'd love to know what the WFO emphasized, not because I think they did anything wrong, but because I'd love to know if they conveyed the full range of those graphics, Gary. Did they convey the most likely as well as the expect this much and the potential, which are the 10 and 90% respectively? I think it's important, that yes, we think this is the most likely forecast, but we also need to make sure that we're communicating the high and low ends. And to the governor who says that, that's not good enough, well, if you have a direct phone line to Mother Nature, let me know, because there are going to be some systems where Mother Nature is going to trick us, and 10% actually was the best. I just think there has to be There has to be a push for improving our forecast for sure. And I think that's where the investment in further research and developing our probabilistic forecasts and also doing the verification research so that we can prove those operational models is really important. This is a social scientist saying that we need to invest more in the physical side for sure, especially in this area. But I also think our partners need to understand that uncertainty is an inherent component to meteorology, no matter how good we are. And that, we're going to continue to refine the tools and the way we communicate our information, but there has to be some acceptance. It's just the way Mother Nature works.
Hey, Gina, let me ask you this. I'm sorry, guys. I've got to ask you this. So 3 of us on this panel are being, sometimes we're accused of being cranky old men that are insensitive. And I'm not going to say which 3, but I'm just saying there's 3 of us, okay? And I've always said to do this job, you have to have an odd combination of sass and grace. And for Gary and for me and for Chuck, we tend to defend the weather enterprise when you get these buffoons that write these horribly inaccurate stories, these stooge politicians that don't know what they're talking about. Are we right to fire back, or do we need to sit back and keep our mouths shut from a social science perspective? Are we doing the right thing by responding like Gary did?
I think, and Gary and I talked about it a little bit at the National Weather Association meeting this past fall about what he did, and obviously that's a personal action, and so I respect Gary's decision to do what he did in that situation. No, I think we all have a responsibility to communicate the credibility of our community. And I think that we are doing a disservice if we don't emphasize that Mother Nature has uncertainty and that our partners are going to have to accept part of that. What we need to accept as a community is that if we're not communicating it well, then here's where the investment in the social science comes in. We need to reconsider the visual ways, the verbal ways that we are conveying it. And I don't know that we as a weather enterprise, I'm not putting any blame on any one sector, but I don't think as a weather enterprise, we have really collectively said, all right, we're going to work on this. I think we've kind of skirted around it. I think that we're now sort of talking about it. And I think these types of events can be great triggers for us to look into it more. I think it's time to invest. We're really on the crux of something really wonderful. I think operational meteorology is in a place where and research is in a place that we can start talking at a really advanced level about probabilistic ensembles and communicating it. And I think that we've got a really vibrant and energetic, vivacious social science community that's ready to work hand in hand with the physical community to come up with solutions for how to communicate it. So I think we're going to turn a corner over the next 10 years and we're going to start finding solutions. And I think the challenge for those that are in operations, be it in the National Weather Service and broadcast weather industry, is that from a social science perspective, I can't hand over the answer on a silver platter and go, oh, here's the perfect way to communicate uncertainty. I don't have that yet. I simply don't.
Why not?
Yeah, exactly. Why not?
There's some uncertainty.
I mean, geez, and that's frustrating. I know for the operational folks out there who would like, Gina, could you give us the best practices? I'm like, well, I can come up with a few, but in general, I don't have the easy answer. The same way your forecast has uncertainty. Well, guess what? My research has uncertainty too. We just calculate it or describe it differently than you do.
No.
By the way, what I heard her say, Chuck and Gary, we can still go after these people. Go ahead, Chuck.
I've been waiting.
Green light. Green light.
Do it respectfully. I think we have to have a respectful conversation with our decision makers. They are core partners. We are in this together, right? We're not going to save lives and protect property if we're only in it by ourselves. So it has to be a collective. But I think when someone is wrongly discrediting our community and our science, we have a right to respectfully stand up for what our science can do and what our science cannot do. Mother Nature has uncertainty, and we have a right and a responsibility to communicate it.
Do you think that's been done in this situation, Gina, post storm?
You know, from the I mean, it's hard to know completely. It's hard to not live in the area sort of where the bullseye of the attention was. And it's tough for me too, because I always like to get the big picture there. And I didn't see what the media covered in that area. So I'm not exactly sure what mass audiences heard. I wasn't on the DSS webinars, or the phone calls, so I'm not exactly sure what our partners heard. So frankly, I think it would be wrong of me to judge what happened at that local scale. I think,
Gary, did the Weather Service lose any credibility, you think, in the situation?
Well, I think it hurt. You know, the Governor Christie in New Jersey behaving that way drew attention in a negative way, you know, to the role of the Weather Service, you know, in events like this. I think any negative is going to be pretty brief and fleeting. You know, in one, you know, the governor's ratings are pretty low. So, you know, he's not a popular figure in terms of having a lot of folks behind him at this point in time in his career. If he had done it earlier in his career, I think it'd have more damage. No, I think, I mean, I pushed back at him and I thought it was deserved, and I don't think I was polite. So, but nor was he. I'm not sure being polite is actually a residency requirement in New Jersey. So I sort of just spoke to him in the language he understood.
So do you live in New Jersey, and is there a bridge near your house?
Yeah, there is, but I don't have to take it. So I'm here. I'm camped out. I like it.
Gary, does it scare you that, you mentioned when you were on the show before about this, Weather Service staff versus constituent numbers situation, the ratio's out of whack in the big markets. Is that going to increasingly be a problem given the federal hiring freeze and other financial problems that are coming for the Weather Service?
Yeah, that was another one of those things that came up when I posted the WeatherBrains comment on Twitter earlier tonight. Is that you're going to talk about the federal budget? You're going to talk about, it's a problem. Right now the Mount Holly office is down 5 people, and and the normal staffing is 25, and a lot of those vacancies are in either directly in operations, or my position's still vacant, and I would support operations as needed. So yeah, they're going to have to look at how they want to handle places that have a lot of infrastructure, places that have a lot of people that want this DSS that Gina has mentioned, that the Weather Service talks a lot about. You have to have a person to do that. That's not a automated process. And if you have the Mount Holly office, it has what's called state liaison office responsibility for both New Jersey and Delaware. And so that means if there's state briefing, not just county briefings, but if there's state briefings going on, the Mount Holly office has the lead for 2 states. There's some National Weather Service offices that don't have any state liaison. They don't have to brief the governor or the state the state Office of Emergency Management. That's done by another office. So there are certain offices that where vacancies are just more painful than others. Everyone's doing the best with what they got. The fact that they have announced, they did put out a vacancy announcement for my position. So the hiring freeze is apparently more like a cold spell, but not a solid freeze. They apparently are getting some exemptions through and getting some positions filled. But the Weather Service does have some severe challenges ahead. And obviously with this administration, I think the challenges grow in terms of funding and having the infrastructure that you need to hire people and promote people in a way that the way we've seen it done in the past. Right now, we're simply not as effective as we were 10 or 20 years ago in the Weather Service, just in terms of hiring and promotion.
But Gary, this is not just a local problem, because the Birmingham office is also down 5 forecasters at this point. So is down 5 staff people. I don't want to say they're all forecasters per se, but so this is, I mean, the fact that it's up there and down here, I mean, it's probably in a lot of other offices too.
It is.
Yes, it is. The average vacancy across the Weather Service, the last numbers I saw, which are probably about 6 months old, but people are telling me it's not getting any better. So there's around 2.5 to 3 vacancies per office. That's the average. So if some offices are going to have 5 or even 6, others might have only 1. So it does kind of go.
Here's one of the risks to that too. You said, they don't have people, but it's also about people that the partners trust. So it's not just about flying someone in for an event.
Right. Yes.
It's about a trusted relationship. And I'll give you very clear examples. And Bill, you were at the focus group, one of the focus groups for impact-based warning. So you heard some of this in the partner focus groups. I recently, I guess actually they were about a year ago now, did focus groups looking at impact-based warnings and severe weather. And we talked to emergency managers and broadcasters as well. But the emergency managers told us it's not just about that they read SPC's outlooks or that they're looking at the Weather Service warnings. They want the emails and they want the briefings, but they're also looking for who's giving the briefing today.
Yes.
And there are risks to this. And I've actually talked about this with some WCMs because they say, oh, did the WCM send the email this morning or was it another forecaster? And that's not to discredit another forecaster. It's just that it's a cue, it's a heuristic for the partners. Oh, if the WCM sends the email, oh, shoot, sugar, this is a bad day. And then it's things like, is it a 1 briefing day or is it a 2 briefing day? And the thing is, if Joe Schmo comes in from another office that no one knows, or someone else gives a briefing off site that doesn't have a relationship with that emergency manager, those heuristics are lost.
Yes.
So that's
Chuck, the loss of funding for NOAA, loss of funding for EPA, I know you got an opinion.
Well, I'm opposed to it, but that's about it. I think they're just being victimized. Long-standing track record this guy is developing. He wants to cut social programs and use the money saved to build up the military, which
and a good-looking wall.
Doesn't make sense to me. And my son's in the military, so it's good for him, maybe, but it's certainly not good for the country.
Hey, Chuck, let me ask you this. If you could write that forecast, let's say you're in Philadelphia and you're communicating that forecast, what would you do differently? Would you do anything differently than what the Weather Service is doing in terms of communicating uncertainty?
Oh, I think I'd rather not answer that question directly because I have no idea what I'd do. And I think I have to say that I agree with Gina. We haven't got any decent solutions floating around. What bothers me is that we were saying many of these same things 10 years ago when all of this enthusiasm for social science first sort of bubbled up to the surface. And I'm still waiting for, with the possible exception of a few people like Rebecca Morse, I'm still waiting for the studies, the surveys and so on that actually give us some information about how we should best accomplish this. I've been waiting for that and waiting for it. We go to conferences and we sit around and sing Kumbaya over the fire, express our viewpoints. Everybody gets a chance to vent. We're making very much progress toward getting to an answer to the question, how the hell do we do this effectively?
And how quickly does that research go out of date too? Because as social media becomes more and more prevalent, are we going into an age where what worked 5 years ago may not work today?
Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the social science is a tremendous, has taught me that it's a constantly changing landscape. Right. And as technology affects communication and so on, then different methods may be more effective than others. Believe me, if we're going to commit to involving social sciences in the development of weather forecasts, this can't be a one and done kind of project.
Right.
It's got to be a continuing effort that is entrenched and, dare I say it, funded.
Oh, I'm going to take it to another level.
So that people can get some real work done.
Well, and I'm in Chuck's camp here. We've been waiting, like you said, for social scientists to produce some studies, and so far there haven't been any. And I understand there's
a few.
Oh, it's not that they're not out. No, all right, hold on. We got to back up. This is gonna,
Gina's going to get cranky like now everybody's cranky on this show. Go,
Gina. I'm not saying there are none. I'm just saying there's a limited amount.
All right, so there are a ton of very dedicated individuals who they don't even have pennies to rub together. We're taking lint and trying to turn it into pennies. I mean, like, there is no money for this. The National Weather Service and NOAA OAR has done a tremendous effort, I would say, in the last 10 years to make a concerted effort to make available funds for this area. So kudos. But this is not just a NOAA National Weather Service, goal. This is weather enterprise. So I would love to see where the investment is from the entire weather enterprise. And if they say that they're already investing it inside their companies, that's probably partially true. And some of that may be proprietary, which I understand. But if we want systematic answers to how to communicate uncertainty, then this has to be a weather enterprise investment. What I would love to see is TV stations, weather industry, and NOAA all together pull money together to start doing longitudinal studies. Every year, it's a new, different national study. So maybe this year it's on uncertainty. Maybe next year it's how people are getting information through cell phones or weather apps, because given that technology plays a big role. Maybe the next year it's about how localized descriptions of actions or risk and actions go together. It's just a different focus each year, right?
But Gina, do you have any realistic faith that commercial interests would do that?
I think that they would if they saw the value in doing so. And I think one of the challenges for the social science community, given that there is not a large sum of money for folks to invest in this, a lot of folks are doing, I've got to say, we have a lot of folks who are volunteering, who are giving their services well beyond just volunteering for one committee, for example. There are a lot of dedicated volunteers within both the AMS and NWA who give a lot of time. But the social science community is giving a lot of energy, effort, and studies. And the challenge is that in doing so, where do they have extra time to then sort of market the results, if you will? They need someone to champion the results, to be that translator, to be that, to bridge the results to practice. I could tell you all sorts of fun ways that you could take existing social science research and turn it into awesome ideas for the weather company, for AccuWeather, for broadcast meteorologists.
Yeah.
But my time isn't free. I would like to, put a meal on my table,
Yeah, you've heard a couple of voices say, well, where is this stuff? And that's one of my observations, is that it's probably out there to some degree, but there's a failure to communicate it down the line.
Well, I wouldn't say a failure. I would just say that, when you're expecting the research community to conduct the research, there's not ample time to commit to that next step. I also think, this is why the National Academy of Sciences is actually looking into this, and kudos to NOAA for really investing money in this study to look at how can we integrate the social and behavioral sciences into the weather enterprise. It frustrates me and it pains me when operational forecasters say, Gina, you've been working on X, Y, and Z for 10 years. How come we haven't seen any results? And to that I say, well, I have done the studies. The Weather Service does have them, but I'm not funded to do the next level. I'm not funded to implement. I'm only funded to hand over the results. What you do with them is then you're empowered to make that decision. And of course, that's frustrating. I would love to see it end to end to end, right? I mean, that would be wonderful. I joked on Facebook about in addition to a SU, I think we need a STU. I think we need a social science 2 operation officer. And perhaps we don't need one in each office. I think that might be a little bit too much in some respect. But I think we do need these bridgers. We need people who understand the research, understand that language, understand the limitations and uncertainty of that social science research, so we can help you implement it into operations in all aspects of weather enterprise, be it the Weather Service, weather industry, broadcast, wherever. But that's why we're not seeing the fast translation. I mean, you're tapping out awesomely energetic community, but they can only work as fast as they're able. And it's, what do they say? It's quality, price, and what's the third one? Quality, price, and time. Which two do you want? Right? So right now we don't have a lot of money, so the research community has been spending some quality and time on it, because they're dedicating a lot of free volunteer time for it. And so there are challenges here. We would love to work faster for you, but it's a challenge. But I think that if we could find more champions, and I'm happy to be one of those, to market, the data and results from the social science community, I think we could absolutely show the value to Weather Enterprise, and I think they would invest in it. I just think we have to do a better job of showing them how they could use it.
I wish that more universities would start integrating some of this into their programs, because, we go through meteorology school, and I was in it, 2 years ago, and you learn dynamics, you learn synoptic meteorology, and you learn a little bit of weather forecasting, but you don't really dabble into any of the uncertainty. And I would argue that when you get out of meteorology school, you're not a very good forecaster either. You have to learn the local area, you have to learn different aspects about your forecast area, and you have to learn how the people in your forecast area behave and how they interpret your forecast. And so if we're trying to communicate all this uncertainty, and we have people coming out of school who don't know how to communicate uncertainty, they just throw out numbers and say, okay, there's the forecast. Are we doing a service or are we doing a disservice?
Yeah, I think that's a really big challenge. One of the things that I would love to see in the very near term future is a way to integrate a course, perhaps a Comet online module, or just an online course, essentially. I think it probably would be too much for each individual meteorology program to add a requirement in. I also think, the AMS just reviewed actually their educational requirements to earn a bachelor's in meteorology, and it includes things like communication, ethics, right? We could get into a whole awesome discussion on the ethical viewpoints of what we communicate and how we communicate it. So that's a whole another really rich area to consider. There's also a need for more things like GIS or data visualization. And so when you start putting these added pressures on meteorology, well, we don't want to take away from the physical science aspect of it. And so what I'd love to see is an online course that we could pull the expertise from all over the social sciences. Mind you, there are many disciplines within the social sciences. We could pull from so many of the experts that present at AMS and NWA, and create an online module that students at all different meteorology programs could attend. And maybe, again, the programs would pay into it so that it could be sustained, but that, you'd only need one course in multiple every week would be a different professor, if you will, but there would be one organization that would help organize the structure for it. I think it would be awesome for more meteorology students to have exposure to the social sciences, for sure.
Sounds like a Comet or Met Ed opportunity too, something like that.
Exactly.
Have we talked about and I'm sorry, I was kind of in and out because I was in show, but have we talked about discussing this with viewers, what they want to hear about? Honestly, I was actually going to make a new graphic tonight about something else, and I sent 4 pictures to a friend of mine, and I asked her which one she liked best, which one conveyed the message quickly and in simple terms. And so she wrote me back and she told me which one she liked. But I feel like I've been doing that a little bit more because ultimately, we're talking to the viewers, so we need their input, don't we?
Aubrey, I just tried that actually in my market. I tried snow maps, and I put the cities, I put the counties, then I put the interstates on there, and then I made a really close zoomed in map that had almost every locality plotted on there. And it was shocking to me the amount of people that had different opinions on each of them. Some people like the county-based version. Some people like the city-based with not a whole lot of cities. Some people really enjoyed the close-up maps, and other people said they were way too cluttered because there was too many cities on there. So perhaps it's something where everyone's unique, Gina.
Yeah, I think it's time for the broadcast community, and I'm not just saying broadcast meteorology, the TV stations. This is where we have to get the directors involved. I think it's time for TV consulting to evolve. I think it's time to recognize that marketing is part of the private sector, and we need to accept that, but so is risk communication. And I think long gone are the days where what tie you wear is the only thing that matters. When we're talking about weather, we're talking about effective risk communication. And I acknowledge that having eyes are important, eyeballs and viewers are important to sustain it. We have to understand that private industry, does have an economic model that they have to follow. So we have to marry marketing with risk communication. And I think it's time for TV consulting to branch out and to include a bit more rigorous social science research with their marketing research, because I think you're absolutely right. I think we do need to know what viewers want. And again, this is where I think if the Weather Enterprise could pull together money and we could have a sustained research fund, we could start looking at year to year what mass audiences think, get that baseline data and start doing longitudinal studies over time. The private sector could have that data available to them, and what decisions they do with it, that's their decision. That could be proprietary. But I think if we pool our money together, we could start getting you that information about what viewers want, what they can handle, what type of uncertainty information they like.
Here's the problem with the consulting model, though, is number one, those people are not going to understand the material.
Amen.
And therefore we can't trust them to communicate it properly. And the other problem with a consultant, and we've been talking about this even here at my station, because there's a new talent coach coming in, and I've been saying this to several people. One of the problems with that model altogether is the consultant shows up, he's there for a day or two, he tells you things, and then 3 days later, it's all leaked back out of your ears, and nobody is paying attention. And so it takes, what's the old saying? It takes 3 weeks to create a habit, right? And so he comes in and says things, you go away, and then you've forgotten it all, and nobody's paying attention to it, including nobody that knows the material. And so that business model doesn't work.
What I'm saying is, if it doesn't work, then change it.
Agreed, but I agree. I agree with you 100%, but I think it's idealistic to think that that's going to change because there's a different cost model in that. I went around to consider, this is 10 years ago. I called all the big ones and I said, you know what? There are no operational weather people in consulting for television, and that's wrong. And they didn't get me. Well, had I known 10 years ago, I would, but I called them and I said the same thing, and they didn't want to invest the money. They didn't get it. They didn't understand it. And this is the kind of thing that, and then when they come in here, and I don't know how often you listen to this program, but they come in here and they say these things and then they go away, and then you get 3 or 4 different interpretations from the news director and the general manager. And this is what leads to tracking. Right, the misuse and the overuse of the tracking, which we've joked about here, but that's the way it irons out.
But what Aubrey said is so stinking important, and I'm afraid we just passed us by. Yeah, I bet you, I'm the only guy on this show that's been to a Dollar General in Gordo, Alabama. Because that's where the real people live that consume our products and services. We're a bunch of pinheads. We sit around these conferences, like Chuck says, we talk and we talk and we talk and we talk, and nothing ever happens. And if you actually go into the Dollar Generals and Walmarts in working class parts of your market where people, our consumers actually are, and talk with them, some of this stuff you can just get right away and start to make some adjustments. And I think that is just brilliant what she did. And while we're waiting on the rest of the world to give us some solution, let's just go talk to people instead of sitting around these weather conferences. At these things we do over and over and over, and nothing ever happens.
Well, that's what the consultants claim they've been doing. They claim they're going out to do.
These boobs don't have. I guarantee you, they've never been to a Dollar General in Gordo, Alabama.
I know, but I'm saying that's what they claim that they're doing. They're going out and doing research, and they do research projects, and they come back and they tell you, and they're pandering to the people that are paying their salaries, and that's the general managers and the news directors.
Everybody stand back. James Spann's head's about to explode.
I'm done.
You know what I'd love to do? This has always been a dream of mine. So if anyone wants to donate, a lot of money to me, let me know. I'd be willing to accept it. Storm chasing is fun to follow Mother Nature, right? But I'm a social scientist, so I want to chase the people. I want to go to the people. Instead of putting a Doppler on wheels, which I know we need for the physical sciences, for the social sciences, I want to basically take a magic school bus and turn it into the social science bus. And I want to turn a school bus into focus groups on wheels. and have all different types of equipment, perception analyzers where they could watch TV media and have them turn dials based on broadcasts, or have them come in. So maybe it's the morning of a severe outlook, and we would drive in on our Magic School social science school bus, and we would actually conduct focus groups that morning with the public. We'd go into Walmart and say, hey, anybody want to participate? Come on down. We're happy to facilitate a discussion. We can get on the site data on how they're feeling, how they're interpreting things, how they'd like it communicated. And then we can do that in the morning. And if the severe weather is that afternoon, first of all, I'm getting out of Dodge because I don't want to be in harm's way. So that's first of all. Second of all, I can call every broadcast meteorologist in that media market and say, this is what I learned. Talk about transitioning social science research into operations. This is what I mean. We got to start thinking outside the box. We got to start doing new things.
Yeah,
if the current ways aren't working, then we need to innovate and start doing something different. And I know that comes with a cost, but if the business model doesn't work, then we need to change it.
Right. And the broadcasters aren't going to pay for it. And if they were, they'd want it to be proprietary.
I think we, though, have an opportunity to do that ourselves, a little bit like kind of what James is saying. I mean, obviously, in the broadcast sector, we're incredibly busy and none of us sleep. But we could take 20 minutes in the morning of a severe weather event or the day before and call one or two people or solicit on Facebook kind of some opinions and reach out to a few of those people more in depth, chat with them on Facebook Messenger and discuss how they're interpreting our forecast and if they're getting the main point we're trying to communicate.
You could certainly do that. I mean, that's obviously a low-cost way of doing it. It won't be generalizable, though, and this is the challenge, right? When you only talk to a few people, but you've got millions or thousands of viewers in your area, a few people does not generalize to your viewing area. And that's why the social science community would like to see a larger investment in this area to try to get that more generalizable. I think the biggest challenge here is that we're dealing with mass communication. And unfortunately, there are only so many ways we can communicate to a variety of people. Again, this is where I say that private sector industry and the diversity of broadcasters that we have is a good thing. It's an asset to our community. But it's absolutely a quick way to get some feedback.
But on that
Gina,
point,
go ahead, Ricky.
I was going to say, do we run the same risk, though, with these surveys? Are the people who are taking the surveys people who like to take surveys?
Or like weather?
Yeah.
So you can screen your sample. I mean, there are definitely ways to ensure that you have a reliable sample, and there are people that are far more expert than I am in that particular area. But there's science to that.
I'm sorry, you've swerved close to one of my hot buttons, and and I don't know if you guys have discussed it since I've been out doing a show, but it goes to the distribution methods. Okay, I don't know if you've gotten into social media, but the broadcasters have clearly swerved, in my opinion, wrongly so, into social media distribution. Where are you on that?
In terms of using social media as a way to convey weather information?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I would say this. I can't even keep up with the types of social media there is, and it seems to me that there are new ones popping up. It almost feels like weekly. I have to keep up with my younger cousins so that I can stay up to date on the newest one. I think, again, this is where are people getting their weather information? Can we honestly say that we know? I think there are some people, and there are social scientists. Fan, excuse me. He's at Eastern Carolina University, is doing some studies on social media and where people are getting their information. But I think that it changes. I think that the function of social media can change, right? So I think it's nice for sort of daily weather. I think sometimes it can be a cue to then go to TV. So it doesn't end up being the end all be all. It just ends up being the sort of the instigator to going to TV or to going to Facebook Live, or, so I don't think we know.
Well, but TV is not, it doesn't play toward the river of news concept that we have gone into, right? There's this river going by, right? And I don't, Terry Heaton and other people named this, but there's the river going by. Television is not that. It can't do that by its very nature. You're going to go interrupt a program and make somebody mad,
right,
or whatever. but we ceded responsibility early on for our digital distribution to templated sites like World Now and IBS and all these other places. And then when that wasn't working, we kind of left it and said, okay, here's this social media. That's quick and easy. But then we went and legitimized those platforms, and that distribution is horrible, especially on Facebook, because the nature of weather information is it's time sensitive, and that stuff is being leaked out over a period of 3 days.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so not only do you have the time issue, but the size of a tweet or size of a text messages are not very effective. Jeanette Sutton at the University of Kentucky has done some really great research on social media, and I know Julie DeMuth, Rebecca Morse at UNCAR, they're doing some new research in this area as well. It's hard to convey a lot. It's hard to convey a big message in a little space. You know, sometimes good things come in small packages. Those small tweets are not very effective at communicating the details of a risk, right? I mean, you can package it with an image or something like that, but it's not going to be hugely effective. And especially if you're communicating a story and you need to have someone read 10 tweets of a story, but they only saw 1 or 2 because they got interrupted in the flow, right? So communication is hard. You know, anyone who says, oh, well, I wish those communication folks could just give us the answer, you are pointing out why this research is so difficult. There isn't an easy answer for this. We've got time issues. We've got space issues in the text. We've got story issues, flow issues. I think we need to utilize every communication medium we have, but I don't think there's a simple solution for fixing any of the challenges of one of those mediums.
So wait, let me stop you on that. You said use every one. So is it better, in your opinion, to post on Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat and Pinterest and LinkedIn and wherever else there are all those people, or is it better to say, look, here is my canonical source. This is where you come when you need weather information. It's the difference between push and pull, right?
Yeah.
All these other things are push, and the user is more valuable and more tuned in when they pull on their terms.
You know what? I'm going to bat the question back to you. What do you want? Do you want to get the most people? Do you want to reach the most people? Or do you want to be the most effective with the people you can reach? Do you know what I mean? So
I don't think that's framing the question the right way. I think the way to frame the question is give the best information and do it in a way that is going to provide the least amount of confusion.
Well, right. And so I think it depends on what you value. And this is where ethics and sort of judgment comes into this. I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think we could make a pretty good case that reaching the highest number of people, if only more people knew about the risk, they would be safer. So we're going to use every medium possible. That's one argument. But then I think we go on the flip side, right? And say what you said and go, no, because I'm not going to be very effective in conveying the risk if I'm conveying it in 20 different ways. I'm going to focus it, and I'm going to hope that you're going to come here because you're going to get a very effective message.
Because on the open platforms where you get what somebody said is, you know, the kid in his pajamas in his parents' basement doing the thing, the signal to noise ratio is no good.
Yep.
All right, so I got to go in a second. Let me ask a question about severe weather. So we are getting to a point, and you've heard me talk about this, where a lot of TV stations and private sector firms are issuing their own warnings in conflict with the Weather Service. I don't like where this is going. Chuck, let me ask you this. How is the severe weather dissemination process in Oklahoma City? Best weather market in the country, should be. How would you grade it out there?
Well, I quit watching it about 10 years ago.
I'd call that an F.
Why did you quit watching 10 years ago?
An incomplete.
I got tired of the bullshit. There's all this stuff going on where they're dissing each other's forecasts, and there's nonsense being conveyed. They have chasers out there who haven't got a clue what they're talking about. And so there's all sorts of bogus messages flowing out of there. I do watch them when they go wall to wall, but I turn the sound off. All I want to do is see the video from the choppers. That's all I really care about.
So, but anyway, so again, in many of these markets,
they've gotten so caught up in the ratings battle that they've forgotten what it is they're trying to do. And, you know, if there's anything that you've shown as clearly as is possible, if you stay focused on what you're trying to do, you can be effective. But they lost their focus.
And it's my opinion that there should be one single source for watches and warnings. We will communicate it differently, and that's the variety that Gina talked about, which I think is great. Some people will choose one source over the other, but it's the same message. We're just communicating it in a different way. It's variety, which is great. But now we're starting to see the messages are radically different. One station says there's a tornado warning. The other one says there's not. One private sector firm says we have a tornado warning, and they light up these turnpike signs. The Weather Service says there's no tornado warning. And we're going down a really bad rat hole, Gina. Am I wrong in this idea, or is that okay? I mean, where everybody does their own warnings. In my opinion, if they watch one channel and he says there's no tornado warning, the other guy says there is. The other guy says dig a hole, you'll only survive if you're underground. The next guy says you got to dry. The next guy says, you know, you got to be in a small room. I'm seeing absolute chaos here, and I'm trying to hope we can get back to some kind of order out of this chaos. And I'm talking severe local convective storms here.
Yeah, the thing you have to deal with severe convective storms is that you have such an extremely short time scale. People don't have time to absorb a lot of information, and if they get a message and then they frequently want to have confirmation, so then they go to some other source, maybe talking to Aunt May, but when they get conflicting information, then that causes paralysis.
And I think it comes down to, as well, you know, what criteria are these different sources using for that warning? And to some people that might seem, well, you know, does the public really know our criteria? I'm not even sure. Some of the criteria is uniform. For snow, it kind of changes from office to office. But I think it matters. You know, for highway, maybe there are different reasons. Maybe there's a different criteria that's different than that of Weather Service warnings, and that maybe is a fair assessment. However, you know, I don't have good research to show that it causes mass chaos, but at the same time, it feels rather intuitive to say that if I have two stations saying there is and two stations saying there isn't, what do I do? So the intuitive part of my brain says that probably would lead to sort of mass chaos in some respect. I think if it's done in a way that, I don't know, uses technology that's different, changes the criteria, and that person understands that, you know, maybe that's a different type of warning. But I think we've got to be careful on what words mean and what we want it to convey. And I think especially for severe weather, you know, as you said, if we're expecting people to shelter when they hear tornado warning, if we want those two things to be synonymous, then I don't think we want to muddy the waters for that.
Right.
Well,
go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I was going to make a point on yours is I think, you know, there's clearly a problem. So the way to fix a problem is to back up and go look at what caused the problem. And what caused the problem that you're talking about is the competitive landscape that was developed. And that's not going to change.
Right.
And you know, but I still say that just maybe it can. I just see a case where there's mass chaos here, and every station's doing their own warnings. I see this train coming. I see it coming. That light is getting brighter and brighter and brighter. Every local TV station, they've started it by these severe weather emergency days or whatever they declare. You know, tomorrow's a severe weather emergency day. There's no severe weather emergency.
Which is coming from consultants, by the way.
Yeah, right. It's these bonehead consultant guys. And now in most markets, you've got 4 out of 5 days they're declaring a weather, whatever it is, day. You know, some kind of weather emergency day.
In the competitive landscape that is there, and I stood and talked to Mike about this after the National Weather Fest or whatever it was up at Rick's office a couple of months ago, and I was trying to get him to come back on the show, and he said no, and he said that he is being told what he needs to do. And that comes from his boss, and he has to answer to his boss, and he has to do what they tell him. And that's what he's going to do. And that is to win
Of course,
the weather
those
war.
bosses that he had,
It's so sad that they take
have a
it
long
completely out of our
track
hands.
record of making decisions badly.
Amen.
But they're there, and then they're doing it, and that's why
But you have to obey orders.
right. And the local boss,
Well, here's
the local boss's order comes from above, and that comes from somebody else above, and that comes from Wall Street.
Here's the thing, with more options for severe weather communication, people can go somewhere else. And this is, again, where I emphasize social science has a role with TV consulting.
You know what, though?
You hype too much,
Yeah.
you lose trust in viewers, and those viewers go somewhere else.
That's right. But you know what I thought of the other day? Sadly, there's an entertainment value portion of this. If there's a tornado somewhere in a DMA, it is really only at any one moment affecting a very small number of people. And we're in there and we're going to interrupt Dancing with the Stars, and there's an entertainment value or information value to it. And that's the greater number of people that they're trying to cater to at that moment.
Well, to me, I'd like to reframe that, because that's almost sort of judging the people who are watching that, going, "Oh, you're watching for entertainment."
No.
I don't watch other people's risks as entertainment. I watch it because I have a deep concern and empathy for those going through it.
Some do and some don't. I mean, look at reality television. That's exactly what has evolved into reality television, is watching somebody else's hardship.
But again, I don't think you can claim that there is one type of viewer for that show. If there's one thing social scientists say, there's a spectrum of people and the reasons why they watch. And empathy might play a role, or even they may see something in that person watching their world that they can relate to, or something. So I think we've got to be careful not to place too much judgment.
Yeah, no, and I didn't mean to suggest that people are selecting based on the entertainment value. I didn't mean to suggest that at all.
But of course, TV, I mean, I respect what you're saying, that TV has an entertainment flavor to it, and therefore it's one of the variables that's factored in.
I think that when I said this the other day, and James got bummed out at me, but I think that we have now turned the corner on the post-television severe weather era. It's going to be long and painful, but we've turned the corner and we've entered that era.
What do you think it looks like?
Different distribution. It becomes a digital distribution where, again, people can choose. But we haven't invested in developing that. We seeded it in the early days, and then we ignored it. Well, management in the industry ignored it and allowed it to go to social media, which was a disastrous mistake.
Well, all right.
But we might be at we might be at the beginning of people realizing that and going, "Oh, okay, well, if we got to go do something else, let's go figure that out now." But transitions are messy.
That's a very interesting discussion for sure.
Before we hit 10 o'clock, I don't know if you guys hit this or not, but I want to say we talked a lot about the distribution of the message, especially this is back to the storm, the East Coast storm, the distribution of the message. And that was a great conversation. I want to jump past it, though, and call on people to not fan a useless, irresponsible flame afterwards. We look at this AP story, and then that escalated into this Gothamist article. Now, I don't know anybody that goes to Gothamist for weather or societal impact stuff. But the headline there and the story there was irresponsible. CBS News did the same thing. The AP, I hear you talked a little bit about Christie, completely irrelevant, irresponsible. He doesn't know he's trying to be Donald Trump because he's in his fading years. And I'm going to call out the Washington Post as well, because I think Jason, if for no other reason, out of professional respect, should not have fanned that flame as well. But what I'm asking people to do is to not distribute, not pay any attention to those people. Leave it go, because trolls and clickbait people, they die in the darkness. Don't shine any light on them. That's what made me so unhappy about this whole episode after the East Coast storm. Leave that stuff alone. None of those people were doing anything except doing clickbait.
Well, and we've always dealt with trolls, but it seems like to me this time there was a new kind of militant troll.
Yeah.
that seized on this opportunity to say that the Weather Service and the broadcasters and everyone was lying to them in order to further an agenda.
Which was ridiculous.
That really scares me because now there's a political climate in our country where that gets listened to.
That's right. And bright people sat around and said, you know what? We got to do this the way we're going to do this. We don't know the exact answer. We're going to do this the way we're going to do it. Maybe looking at something like Atlanta or the Birmingham ice storm and saying, you know what? You change your mind at the last minute. That's going to cause problems. But these are thoughtful people who are not doing it by commercial interest, by the way. So get off of their back. And then other people who distribute this stuff that calls them liars or whatever, that's just a bunch of nonsense. And
not doing it to further a global warming agenda. That just really frightened me when I saw that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go too. I'm almost through a new book by Tim Wu called The Attention Merchants, and it's really about advertising. But when you go back and read this and read the history, and the parallels to what we're talking about are staggering. Hey, thanks everybody. I'm sorry I got to go. The news has started, but thanks to all these smart people who joined us. See you.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Thanks for being here. So the panelists that are left, what do you think about the pushback I saw for the first time, really, from the mass media on the naming of the winter storms by the Weather Channel? You know, it seemed like we saw some people actually attack for the first time when finally they had a name that I liked.
My feelings about naming winter storms are well known, and so I'll just leave it at that.
There's actually an AMS committee forming to review the value, whether there is or is not value, I should say. So it's neutral. It's going in neutral on whether or not the weather enterprise should take it on. And we've got representation coming from the National Weather Association as well. So hopefully
how are they going to measure value?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no money for this, right? So it's not an economic study. But, you know, they're going to look at it from a few different points of view, from sort of the physical science value. Is it possible to do it from that point of view? Is there value in doing it for the point of view of social media coordination? That might be the purpose of it. It might not be a broader, you know.
The Weather Channel has sent out a consistent message whenever this whole issue is criticized about naming winter storms. They say it helps us communicate more effectively. And I have yet to see a single study that demonstrates that to be a fact. It is made up bullshit as far as I'm concerned.
I agree with you. I've said the same thing to my colleagues. I'm a research gal, so I like to see the data. And when you use the word effective, I like to see the data to back it up.
While I'm not for it at all, I do find it very interesting that when channels like ABC News and NBC News are trying to find pictures nowadays, they're not searching, the words blizzard. They're searching for that winter storm name because people are using that and they're able to geolocate those tweets as a result.
Yeah, I'll tell you though, for Stella, it didn't help me at all. They're just a personal, I'm not saying I'm anti-winter storm naming it at all, but it was such a large storm that using Stella didn't give me any sort of geographic specificity. Stella in Boston, Stella in Virginia. Sure. So I found hashtag Virginia weather, DC weather, MA weather easier actually to find it than using Stella. But if you're looking, but again, it depends what the purpose is. And that's why I want to remain open-minded. If you're doing it from the point of view of broadcast and trying to search through what people are saying and get a feel for what people are communicating about the storm, that is a very different function than if I want to know the impacts of a snowstorm in Virginia. So I really think it just depends on why it's being used, what the purpose is, and what the goal is.
Well, I know it's past Brian's bedtime, so he's going to be he's going to be fussing at the end of the show here. So lightning round, Gary, are we going too fast to the term blizzard in the Northeast nowadays?
That topic actually just came up in some email exchange over the weekend, and yeah, there's some legitimate concern there that it's sort of the winter equivalent of tornado. You get everyone's attention, and it may not be, that you have to be careful when you pull that trigger. So yeah, there is some discussion going on, including some discussion with the local weather service office, involving potential overuse of the term blizzard. I'll just say it's the thought has occurred to people and they're talking.
All right, Chuck, you had a great post on Edwin Kessler. Tell our listeners about him and why he was so important.
Well, he was the first director of the Severe Storms Laboratory, and it's clear that he had a vision for what he wanted the laboratory to do, and in particular, that meant a heavy focus on radar. And so, a lot of the progress that the nation has experienced in getting Doppler radar implemented and now polarimetric radars. He's sort of one of the more important people in making all that happen. Yeah. And he was generally a pretty good leader. I didn't agree with all of his administrative decisions. But then again, I wouldn't want to have me for an employee either.
And Gina, you mentioned it, and Ricky wanted to ask it, but we never got a chance. What about the graphics that came out of some of the weather service offices that said at least this much worst case and most likely? How did those work? And I'm
actually conducting research for the National Weather Service on those graphics, and I don't have any data yet, and I probably wouldn't say the results yet, even if I had some. But I think they're going in the right direction. I don't know yet how they work. I also don't know how they're communicated. Like I said, it's one thing to post them on the web. It's another thing to really convey them in decision support with that trusted person giving the message. So I think we're going in the right direction. I mean, I think we've got to cut ourselves some slack that we're all saying we haven't seen enough progress. I'd love to see more progress too, but I think we're really pushing the limits of what our science can do. We're finding new ways to convey uncertainty on the meteorological side. We're working together more with social scientists. So I think we're going in the right direction. I'm really excited. As many challenges as we have, I think I'm really excited. I think we're on the crux of seeing new severe weather communication and media. I think we're on the turning point of seeing some really neat integration of social science into the weather enterprise. And I think, come back to me in 5 years, I think we'll be communicating pretty differently.
Awesome. Gary, anything to add about those products?
Well, I'm a big fan of them. They started at the Mount Holly office while I was there, and we had some discussions over how they should be communicated and formatted. And Gina mentioned, DSS. I downloaded, several of the briefings that were available for last week's event from the Mount Holly office. And that's what's sent out to the emergency managers. And it included those, it had both the most likely and then also the low and high end range. And so they are actively including those, and that was standard practice while I was there. So they're actively including that in the briefings, the emergency managers. How those are verbally being conveyed, say in a phone call or a conference call, that people have that in front of them, but what's being wrapped around that, I don't know, now that I'm no longer there. But I know that as far as that high-end one, that answers the questions that emergency managers inevitably ask. We give them our best forecast, and then they want to know what should they plan for in terms, if it gets worse, or we see a trend where the numbers have been going higher, how much higher do you think they could go? What's the reasonable, high-end amount or reasonable worst-case scenario, which is sort of like one of my favorite terms, because I've heard them ask that several times from the emergency management perspective. So I know those are popular. The low-end number turned out to be pretty good for the recent event last week. So that one probably doesn't get as much attention as it should, but that one showed value last week also.
Well, we thank all the panelists for staying up late with us tonight. It's a hashtag my favorite show ever, and we crossed off most of the things that I sat at dinner and thought about tonight that I wanted to hear about. So you guys were awesome. So it's that time of the show where we go around the table, the big digital mahogany table here at WeatherBrains, and get your picks of the week. I'll start with Brian Peters. Brian.
I usually go to the big story at the Boston Globe, and I was a little disappointed because they didn't have any pictures of the recent event, but they had some very interesting pictures of past snowstorms. And I don't know if you are a little bit of a history buff like I am, but it was kind of cool to see the snow as well as the fashions and the cars and the old things. So I'm going to make that my pick.
Awesome. Now, Kevin, I know you probably can't talk, but give us a hand signal if you can do a pick at any point during a commercial break or something. So, and then we'll let Brian give your pick in a minute if we don't hear from you. But Dr. Doswell, do you have a pick of the week?
I'm not even sure what a pick of the week is.
Well, you're my pick of the week, Dr. Doswell. Thank you for being on the show. Anything you want that you'd like to share with us in terms of?
I'm going to pick the Blackhawks to win the Stanley Cup.
There you go. I like that pick. that works for me. But we thank you for being here tonight. You're always incredible, and you've capped off our blockbuster month. Thank you very much. Gary, did you have time to pick up a pick of the week?
I'm going to recommend one of the other groups that I sometimes interact with, the Weather Social. They were, I like to say, I don't necessarily agree with what was posted, but they put up a post regarding the use of snowfall maps, snow totals, and not just the typical thing we complain about someone putting something out 10 days in advance, but even their usefulness in the immediate run up to an event. Again, it's making me think a little bit, so I'll just say, again, the group's called the Weather Social. If you Google that, you'll find it. And the most recent blog entry is on snowfall maps, really just their utility, plain and simple.
Outstanding. Well, thank you for sharing that. Thanks for being here on short notice, Gary. We appreciated your expertise.
You're welcome.
And Gina, it's been really nice having you on the show and having all of your insight. Do you have a pick of the week for us?
Well, I didn't know when you said a pick of a week, I thought it was a picture of the week. So
that'll work too.
That'll work too. Well, I hope he doesn't get mad at me for showing it. So
He will.
I was interacting with Greg Carbon from the Weather Prediction Center, and he was teaching me about ensemble models. And so this is Greg with matches explaining to me probabilistic information of ensemble models.
There you go.
So I thank Greg for sitting down and interacting with the social scientists and teaching me about ensemble forecasting.
Well, good. Yeah, Greg is one of our favorite people, and it was kind of sad to see him being beaten around a little earlier this week for no real reason. So,
the only agenda our community has is to keep the public safe. And so, again, Mother Nature has uncertainty, and I'm not going to apologize for that. That is the truth. Mother Nature has uncertainty, and we have a responsibility to communicate it.
And what's that margarine commercial from the 1960s? It's not nice to fool Mother Nature, right, Gina? Only Brian's old enough to remember that, so I'll just move on.
I am old enough to remember that, unfortunately.
Ricky Matthews, it's been a pleasure having you on the show tonight. Thanks for all your great input. Do you have a pick of the week?
I do have a lot of fun tonight. Let's see. I had the Go 16 ABI Quick Bands information. It's like a quick little spreadsheet or website you can read that kind of talks about all the different bands of GOES are and what they can be used for. Really great information.
Yeah, that is good information. I'll second that.
That's outstanding. So share a little bit about the podcast real quick. How can our listeners jump over and hear what you guys are doing?
So we have a website, carolinawxgroup.com, or I think it actually redirects to carolinaweathergroup.com. That's probably the best way to get in touch with us. We're also on iTunes, Google Play. You can watch us on YouTube either live Wednesdays at 8, or you can watch us after the fact. We also are on Twitter at carolinawxgroup. So if you want to tweet us and interact with us during the show, you can do that as well.
Well, you could say we were the best weather podcast because we were the only weather podcast. But now, Brian Peters, I think we've been passed by the youngsters.
You're still the best.
Yeah, but we're still the oldest.
Yeah, we'll always be the oldest, that's for sure. Well, my pick of the week is the National Tropical Weather Conference. They're getting the final preparations for that. It's April 5th through the 9th. In South Padre Island, and always a great time. I wish we were going, Brian. That was a fun one.
Yeah, me too. That was fun.
Ago. They always have great people there. Of course, Neil Frank, Max Mayfield, Bill Reed, Rick Knabb. Our guests from last week, Phil Klotzbach, will be there. Of course, Brian Norcross. Some other great folks will be there. Always a fun event. That's my pick of the week. And next month or next week, we will wrap up our Blockbuster National Weather Podcast Month guest list. Tonight, of course, having Dr. Doswell and a bunch of other heavyweights, but Jim Cantori and Kim Cunningham will join us next week. That'll be a fun show. And then we'll move into April and talk about hurricanes on Monday, April 3rd with Jim Williams. So some great guests coming up on WeatherBrains. It's been a great month, and we've had a lot of fun. So without any further business and being well past Brian's bedtime at this point, we'll go ahead and take a motion that we adjourn. And until next Monday night, when we talk to Jim Cantori, who's hopefully not standing in a blizzard somewhere, I'm Bill Murray, and I hope you have a great night and a great rest of the week.
Thank you all. Appreciate Ricky.
Thank
Gina?
you. Really appreciate you.
Chuck?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Y'all come back anytime.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
days ago, some of the northeastern cities were kind of missed. It was a placement error, but let's see if they're still on the air here. No, they're not. What's always creepy is that there's like 25 people watching a blank screen. Hello, 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 hello. Boy, that was a great show. That's the kind of show I need to go back and listen to a few times. So I can't wait to listen to the audio version. The audio podcast is going to be released tomorrow morning early, probably 2-3 o'clock. And great having Chuck Doswell. He's one of my heroes, one of my mentors. Again, very interesting topics and very important topics. So thank you guys for watching. We are on Song of the Night, by the way. That's the reason I'm holding my phone on Periscope. So if you want to follow us along here, we're over on my Twitter feed. Just go to twitter.com/span. And we'll see you guys next week for WeatherBrains. Thanks for watching. Have a great week and God bless.